morning! Welcome back. I'm Sloan from Sloan Rosenthal Knits. Thanks again to everybody who tuned in last week. Last week I talked a little bit more about my design process and my thoughts on seams and seamlessness. And today we're just going to do a quick hit since it is seriously looking like sweater season outside, which I'm so excited. That's a strange thing when you live in Northern California to say you're excited about a cloudy day. But it looks like it's going to be cloudy and in the 60s all day, so I'm super psyched to both work on sweaters and wear some. So today I wanted to do a quick hit on what makes a great Rhinebeck sweater. So as many of you know, the New York Sheep and Wool Festival at Rhinebeck is held in late October. It started out as really kind of a 4-H fair type of thing. It was a New York State really livestock show and has now become kind of homecoming for knitters. So it's a great place to find small and unique yarns, which I'll talk a lot about in a future episode. A great place to see other knitters, to learn more about new yarns and techniques that you wouldn't have seen. There's a sheep to shawl competition where they literally shear the sheep, spin the yarn, and make a shawl in a couple of days, which is amazing to watch. There's lots of livestock auctions, there's sheepdog trials, which is my friend Em's favorite thing to see. And it's all around just a really great weekend in upstate New York. If you want more on Rhinebeck, read Clara Parks's excellent book Knitlandia, where she talks about many great spots to go in the Knitterverse, including, what it's like to go to Rhinebeck. One of the traditions that sprung up around Rhinebeck is the idea of the Rhinebeck Sweater. There's a book of the same name by Isolde Teague from a few years ago where she had a bunch of designers design a sweater for the festival. But really what that phrase means is kind of a new sweater that you make for fall and really for fall fiber festival season. One of the things that's really special about going to Rhinebeck is seeing everybody wearing the thing they're kind of most proud to have made that year. And whether it's new or not, it's always something where people wear the thing that is sort of most knitterly that they have, that they're most excited to show off to other knitters. And for me as a designer and as a knitter and an avid people watcher, it's one of my favorite parts of going to the show. If you want to see some great Rhinebeck sweaters, Christy Glass, who's Christy Glass Knits here on YouTube, has 2 really great videos from the last couple of years called Tell Me About Your Rhinebeck Sweater, where she went around and interviewed people about their sweater and what it was like. If you look in the 2016 one for about 2 minutes, you'll see Emily and I'm talking about the Stinson Beach cardigan, which was my Rhinebeck sweater from 2 years ago. So one of the things you mostly see when you hear people talk about their Rhinebeck sweaters is their joy in what they made. And the reality is that a Rhinebeck sweater can be anything. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about what I think about as a knitter and a designer about what makes a great sweater for this kind of event. I think there's something really classic for Rhinebeck about a sweater with a lot of knitterly details, so whether it's cables or color work, but it's something that shows your work a bit. There's obviously a place for great stockinette sweaters and great relatively simple garments, but I tend to not wear those to yarn shows. Try to design things where that work is really going to show from a ways away. I want people, if you're wearing my sweater at Rhinebeck, I want people to see you from across the room or across the field while you're standing there with your apple cider donut and say, that's a great sweater. Oh my goodness, where did you find it, right? But I want you to feel fabulous while you're wearing it, and I want you to be psyched to show your knitter friends what you made, and I want people to come up to you and ask you about it, and I want it to be the eye-catching, Rhinebeck experience you hope to have. Sweater I wore for Rhinebeck last year, Angwin, which has just cables everywhere, right? And they form a really rhythmic and modern-looking texture, and that's a sweater you can wear to the office and out at night and on the weekends, but it also is a great sweater for a yarn show because it's a dramatic kind of collection of knitting skills and techniques. And I like doing that kind of thing for shows because I think it's the kind of thing that feels very knitterly and very sort of true to the event and the environment. One of the other things that is an issue at Rhinebeck is, of course, what the weather is like. So the last 2 years, it's been unseasonably warm. The first year that I went to Rhinebeck in 2015 was the year it snowed. And Sunday morning, I remember I had made this alpaca blend sweater. It was in plucky snug worsted, which is an amazing yarn. And it was like a 3/4 sleeve cardigan. And I was wearing it and like a merino tank top and a long sleeve shirt and a hat and a cowl and a pair of mitts, and I was standing there with Emily in this field in the snow and freezing. I was so cold, and I was like, okay, all of the Rhinebeck sweaters from here on out will be like warm, solid sweaters, and I will never be cold at Rhinebeck again. And then the next year it was like 55, and the next year it was 72, and I was sweating. But I have not been cold at Rhinebeck since. So one thing to think about, and it's hard to plan way ahead, is the weather. So this year, part of the reason I have designed two fall sweaters, one of which is heavier and one of which is a little bit lighter, is because I'm aiming to have something to wear if it's warm or if it's cold. So weather is a thing to think about. It's usually relatively chilly in upstate New York, but kind of your standard fall sweater is going to be about the right thing. I really prefer cardigans for Rhinebeck because I think they make really good layering pieces, and again, when it is unexpectedly warm, you can take it off and the rest of your outfit sort of retains its integrity. And also, obviously, there's a lot of fun you can have with cardigans with the design elements with, you know, is it going to have a shawl collar? Is it going to have button bands or integrated bands, or what are you going to do there? There's lots of fun design choices to make. I like shawl collars for Rhinebeck. The new one's going to have a shawl collar, but again, that's like not a requirement. The other thing, my other piece of advice, I use a durable yarn. I didn't do this last year because I had just knit a bunch of really crunchier things that I loved, but that were a little bit on the crunchier yarn side, and I was just desperate to knit with something that felt ridiculously soft. And so I made then two sweaters out of Woolfolk Tove, which feels like you're knitting, as I said last week, with angel butts, and it's wonderful, delightful to knit with. It did not make the world's hardiest sweater, but it actually held up incredibly well at the show. So I wore it to the very sweaty in the Untangled show on Friday night, and I wore it both days of the weekend, while carrying a bag, standing in a field of sheep, wearing indigo dyed jeans, which was a poor choice for a white sweater, in a high contact environment for a sweater like that. And it was fine. I came home, I de-pilled it, the sweater's great. I wore it a bajillion times last year. I didn't take it off for a bunch of the winter, except at night. So it worked out fine. I recommend if you're considering purely kind of what's going to be practical to wear that weekend, make something in a slightly hardier yarn. So something that's either a woolen spun that's going to bloom a lot, or a worsted spun with, that's a multi-ply, that's got some heft to it, that's got some roundness, so it's not going to fall apart on you while you're in what is a pretty challenging environment for sweaters. Because again, you're outside, people are touching you, people are touching the sweater. That's a thing that happens a lot at Rhinebeck that doesn't happen in real life. You're wearing a backpack, you're carrying tote bags of yarn. There's a lot of, it's a high risk kind of setting for a sweater. So make it in a yarn that's gonna last and gonna survive. One thing that's always a question with Rhinebeck is color. You see a lot of really bright things. If you're into really bright things, make a really bright thing. If you're not into bright things, don't make bright things. I do think dark colors are not great for show sweaters because they don't show the detail as well. And again, that's like a purely pragmatic consideration. And if you desperately want a black cabled sweater, you should make one. They look amazing. I just tend to not make samples that way because I can't photograph them. So that's why you'll tend to see, if you see me at a show, you'll see me wearing like white or gray or a bright jewel tone or something that I am going to be able to, again, photograph the work that I've done and the detailing I've shown in the sample. But that's a consideration, more for the photography than for the experience. What else makes a great Rhinebeck sweater? The most important thing is something that you love. If you don't like it and you're nervous wearing it, it doesn't work. It's got to be the thing that you love and are psyched about. The first year we went to Rhinebeck, I wore a sweater that was one of the first adult sweaters that I had made in pieces and seamed, and in a time in my life when I was incredibly busy. We had just had our second kid. I had just gone back to work. I had narrowly avoided going to trial in Detroit for 6 months. So it took me a very long time to make the sweater. I was like not sure about the buttons, I was not sure about the sleeves, there were lots of things I was ambivalent about, and I was kind of nervous the whole weekend. And part of that was, it was my first time at Rhinebeck, I was a little socially anxious about the environment and would we meet people and what were we gonna do, and I just felt a little, it was like not quite right. And the next year I wore still one of my favorite things I've ever made, the first sweater I ever designed top to bottom myself, the original prototype for Stinson Beach. And I was so much happier. And it wasn't just because I was wearing a sweater I designed myself, although that was really fun and that was a lifelong dream to like wear a sweater that I designed at Rhinebeck. But I was wearing something that I felt really good about, that felt like me, it felt true to the environment and true to what I had wanted. And so it was the right thing. And I felt great all day and we had a wonderful time. Incredible memories of wearing that sweater. I have incredible memories of wearing Angwin last year. I have even more incredible memories of the first Tangled Up in Gray I saw walking in line to go in on Saturday morning. That was like a life-changing experience to see someone wearing something I had designed at Rhinebeck. That's my sort of quick hits on what makes a great Rhinebeck sweater. Wear something that's going to show your work, do it in a color you love, and do it in a yarn that's going to survive in that kind of environment. Maybe consider a slightly heavier weight yarn because again, it's going to do all those things a little bit better, but if fingering weight is what works for you, go for it. That's it for me this week. You can catch me on Instagram and Ravelry at SK Rosenthal, on the web at sloanerosenthalknits.com. We're going to be launching a website redesign later this week, and by email at hello@sloanerosenthalknits.com. Or hit me up in the comments below if you have any questions. Tell me about your Rhinebeck sweater. I want to hear what you're making. I want to hear what excites you about fall sweater season. And I'll be back next week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.